Hospitals in Gaza have become battle zones. Patients and health workers are victims of Israel's war. The director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in the north is missing after being detained for questioning. How can the UN and the world powers stop Israel from attacking health facilities? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. The United Nations says only 16 of the 36 hospitals in Gaza are operational and only able to offer partial services. Not one of them is in the north of the Strip. The UN has verified more than 650 Israeli attacks on Gaza's medical facilities since the war began in October 2023, and at least 1,054 health workers have been killed. Israel says Hamas fighters use hospitals as control centres, but doesn't provide any evidence to substantiate its claims. Is it possible to halt the complete collapse of Gaza's health system? What actions can the international community take to protect hospitals and medical professionals from Israeli attacks and prevent what the United Nations is calling a human rights catastrophe? We'll discuss these questions with our guest, but first, this report by Sarah Gill.
Medical coats, masks and scrubs are symbols of healing, and under international humanitarian law, during conflict, doctors and nurses are granted special protection. But this is Gaza. Here, those who have sworn an oath to save lives are themselves at risk. Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, the director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, was detained in late December when Israeli forces surrounded the facility, forcing patients and medical staff to leave. Their own army footage shows the paediatrician speaking to the soldiers. Shortly afterwards, the hospital was destroyed and Dr. Abu Safia taken into custody. And his wife, Albina, has pleaded for his freedom.
I don't even know where he is. I don't know why they arrested him. He's a doctor, and he wants to do nothing else but to take care of the patients and wounded people. So what is the problem, and why have they arrested him?
Dr. Abu Safia is the latest on a long list of Palestinian medical workers arrested and interrogated for what Israel says are national security reasons. Another prominent figure was Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, the head of orthopaedics at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. The surgeon defied Israel's forced evacuation orders and continued to treat patients until he was detained in December 2023. 4 months later, Israeli prison authorities declared Dr. Bursh dead. Reports state that he had been raped and tortured. These are just two of the names and the stories that we know. Gaza's health ministry has told Al Jazeera at least 1,054 medical professionals have been killed during Israel's war. The UN says it's contributing to the catastrophic degradation of the health system.
Time and again, hospitals have become battlegrounds, rendering them out of services and depriving those in need of life-saving care.
In May, the International Court of Justice in The Hague said there were reasonable grounds to believe the Israeli army was carrying out a genocide in Gaza, something Israel has repeatedly denied. But it does warrant the question: if Israeli forces continue to destroy healthcare facilities and continue to target medical professionals, who will be left to treat Palestinians? Sarah Gill, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. Dr. Mohammed Adeel Mughaiseeb is in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. He's the Deputy Medical Coordinator for Gaza for Doctors Without Borders and has lived and worked in the Strip for many years. In London, Ontario, is Michael Lynk, a UN human rights lawyer and the former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. And in Dallas, Texas, is Dr. Mohammed Adeel Khaleel an orthopaedic surgeon who recently returned from the Gaza Strip. Welcome to Inside Story. I'd like to begin in Khan Yunis with Dr. Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed, there is a doctor in an Israeli jail right now, Hussam Abu Safia. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia is not the first doctor that has been arrested or detained. I mean, there are several doctors since the beginning of this war and medical staff nurses, as well as paramedics who've been arrested by the Israeli army during this 400 days of war. We were calling to avoid targeting really the hospitals, the medical facilities, clinics, staff, and unfortunately this didn't stop since that time.
But this continues to happen. Just talk us through your personal experience of being in a hospital when the Israelis have attacked.
I mean, as you know, I mean, the doctors who are working and the medical staff who are working are part of the population here. I mean, they are from Gaza. They have families. They have families living in places where there's evacuation orders coming. There are some of them who had, in our colleagues, that we were working in the operating room doing surgery, and suddenly they received the news that an airstrike happened and their member of the family had been killed or injured. I mean, working in such context without security is very difficult for the medical staff in Gaza. Very, very difficult. When I'm saying very difficult in terms of security, not security for yourself as a medical staff, but for your family, how to protect your family. I mean, the situation is really complicated, very catastrophic. We were calling since the beginning, MSF, to avoid the medical targeting medical hospitals, but unfortunately, we MSF as well has been evacuated several times from the hospitals that we were working. Our staff, some of the members of our staff has been arrested. Some of them have been injured.
Let me bring in Dr. Mohammed Adeel Khaleel here, who's in Dallas, Texas. You recently returned from the Gaza Strip. It is an impossible situation on almost every single level. You don't have enough equipment. You don't have enough medical supplies. You don't have enough staff. Those staff that you do have are constantly under attack. What's it like being a medical professional in Gaza right now?
It's unimaginable. I think in the south. So I was in Khan Yunis in the south in European General Hospital in April of this year, and then in November we went up north to Ali Hospital, the Baptist Hospital in Gaza City. And it's just the level of destruction, particularly up north, is just unbelievable. I mean, it looks like nothing short of a post-apocalyptic scene from a scientific fiction movie. Like, I mean, everything is flattened. People are living in the remains of of the buildings that were there, and those buildings are now getting attacked. I mean, you literally have you don't see soldiers. Typically you see these drones that are just dropping bombs, and then these quadcopters that come off the back of the drones to shoot anything that's left living. And many of the medical providers that we worked with, their families would come in as victims of these attacks, and they would mourn. It would oftentimes happen at the end of the day, and they would mourn through the night and then come back the next morning and be back at work, helping patients. The lack of supplies is truly one of the biggest problems in terms of doing these medical missions. Back in April, we were able to bring in many of the supplies that we used through the Rafah border. Since the Rafah border has been closed, now coming through Kerem Shalom, they've severely limited the ability to bring in any equipment, which makes it very difficult to take care of these patients. I mean, it's really, to witness the doctors that are there in Gaza taking care of patients with such limited supplies is truly a lesson for all of us. And we go there and are just there to utilize what is available. Up north, in particular, there's no intramedullary nails to stabilize a fracture. There's no pedicle screws to stabilize the spine. The physicians are literally using external fixators that have been taken off of patients that have either been treated or have passed away.
Dr. Abu Mughaiseeb, Dr. Khaleel has just said an extraordinary thing, that some of the victims coming into hospital were relatives of the doctors that were trying to help them. That is something that I don't think has been stressed enough. These are families, Palestinian families, who live and work in Gaza. Do you think people outside of Gaza really understand what's going on inside?
I mean, of course, I mean, there is some international medical teams who are entering to Gaza. They volunteered, they worked, as my colleague mentioned just now. They're able to come. But I mean, the majority, they don't know what is being a doctor or a medical staff inside a hospital, which is partially functioning, which partially damaged as well, with lack of material, lack of equipment, lack of drugs disposals. I mean, Gaza, before the 7th of October, I mean, there was 40% of the medical drugs and medical disposables were zero stock. I mean, that was before 7th of October. Now it's around 80% of these items are zero stock. So when we said that we operated patients without anesthesia or painkillers, it was right at the beginning of the war. There was lack of these items. When the doctor, my colleague just mentioned now that there is no nails, no external fixators to do orthopedic surgery. I mean, to do some surgery, you need some material. These materials are not present because you are not able to bring it now. Since May, it became more complicated with the closure of Rafah terminal. I mean, you cannot bring everything now through Kerem Shalom. I mean, there is some items that you cannot bring, and mainly items which are used in the surgery, or by the Israeli it's called double used. I don't know the other word. But working here is that I think it's a huge difficulty for the staff, knowing that he has a family, basic needs, as you mentioned as well. There is no water, there is no food enough, there is no security, there is no shelter. So imagine medical staff working in such condition and thinking as well about his family.
Let's bring in Michael Lynk here, who is in London, Ontario. Michael, is there ever a legal justification for destroying a hospital in an active war zone?
On the very narrowest of grounds could a justification be made. Let's put the legal protection of hospitals in a conflict zone in context. They, because of their absolutely essential services to the civilian population, have the highest degree of protection under international law. That means the hospitals are protected. That means the ambulances are protected. That means the security routes supplying the vital needs for the hospitals are protected. And that means, of course, that healthcare workers are protected. They would only lose their protection if they're engaged in actions that are detrimental to the enemy and that are outside of their humanitarian function. And even then, the onus rests on the attacking army to justify the degree of attack that they've made upon that hospital. And as we've heard from UN officials and non-governmental organizations over the last several weeks commenting on what has been going on with respect to the attacks on the hospitals, particularly in the north, there has been insufficient or no justification offered whatsoever in terms of evidence by the Israelis to justify the degree of destruction that they've rendered upon these hospitals.
It's an almost total destruction of the healthcare sector. It's the arrest of individual doctors, medical healthcare professionals. There is, like you say, there is a very narrow definition of what's legal and what isn't legal. But is there a framework to stop Israel, Michael Lynk? Is there anything the international community can do immediately?
Yeah, it's a very simple word. It's called accountability. And accountability has been missing in action, throughout this 57-year-old Israeli occupation. And it's been missing in action throughout the 15 months of this war. Back in May 2016, in an example of very responsible international diplomacy, the UN Security Council passed a general resolution laying out the very strict protections under international humanitarian law for civilians, for healthcare centers, and for healthcare personnel. And it emphasized, among other things, that the obligation on the attacking army was to do everything feasible to ensure that these vital civilian institutions and vital civilian workers were not the objects of either direct attacks or indiscriminate attacks. And it also emphasized in this resolution that these attacking armies do not operate with impunity and that they must be brought to justice where there is credible grounds for violating international law.
Let's bring in Dr. Mohammed Adeel Mughaiseeb, who is in Khan Yunis. You just heard from Michael Lynk there talking about the legality of all of this. Accountability is not happening, and you're seeing it and you're witnessing it firsthand. Does this make you angry that the international community simply can't stop Israel?
I mean, it makes everyone angry. It's not me. I mean, who are living in Gaza or witness what's going in Gaza, and mainly in the medical facilities or hospitals, will get angry. I mean, of course, we'll get angry. I mean, I mean, hospitals are targeted. I mean, several times we called not to target hospital, but then other target. There is excuses that there is some military groups are in the hospital. But for us, I mean, we have been working in Shifa hospital. We didn't see military groups there. We didn't see in Nasser before. We didn't see in the Indonesian hospital before. So, I mean, all these claims by the Israeli army, it was not really clear. I mean, every time they enter, there is nothing there. I mean, what we saw and what we witnessed, MSF is patients and doctors, medical staff, and people who were sheltering in the hospitals.
Michael, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but I want to go to Dallas, Texas. Dr. Khaleel, you've just heard there the legality of all of this, or illegality, quite frankly. We've talked about the anger coming from Gaza. When you're back in Texas and you're speaking to people, are you lobbying now to try and get something done to stop this, or have you just given up any hope that there is anything that can be done?
I think it's very. You never want to give up hope. I think we still continue to speak up and speak in smaller gatherings. The hope is to try to get the message across to someone in power, in Washington D.C., somewhere where something can be affected. I think if you think about, so when we were up in the northern part at Ali Hospital, that was the first hospital, if you remember, that got attacked, and there was a big international inquiry on whether the Israeli military would attack a hospital, and there were so many investigations, questions of justification, and since then I think the military has been allowed to act with impunity. Now, literally every single hospital is attacked in some capacity and partially functional. In Gaza City, when we entered, they specifically told us that no one hospital is fully functioning. So you're traveling between 4 hospitals to get cases done, and it is very disheartening to see things go down this path of continued destruction. But I think if you turn to the physicians in Palestine, they don't lose hope. They're continuing to work. We're in a privileged position as physicians from the U.S. and from Europe. There's some level of security that we kind of assume because the military knows where these foreign nationals are while we're working. But for the Palestinian physicians, there is no security whatsoever. Yet they still maintain hope. And I think, I was there in November when the presidential election results came through for the U.S. and a number of people were joking around, congratulating us on Trump winning. And that was part of the discussion. I think, we can't really count on any change that was happening in the Biden-Harris administration. They've been very clear that they were never going to change course. I think with Donald Trump, he has made several disparaging remarks about Palestinians and the Middle East, but he is an international figure as the president of the United States, and that was part of the discussion that we had there. Is that you can't really count on his humanitarian side to necessarily kick in, but I think at some point, hopefully, his ego will kick in. I don't know how much longer American leadership can tolerate looking like they're subservient to an international entity that's actively committing a genocide.
Michael Lynk, one of the things when the history of this will be written, one of the terms that's going to be used a lot is war crimes. You've got to prove war crimes, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to do that if everything has been destroyed. Gaza is in complete ruins. What's the priority now for the legal community to try and get information, to try and get testimony? Where do you start building a case?
Sure. We have 2 legal processes internationally in The Hague that offer some promise of eventual accountability. We have the South African application alleging that Israel is in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. Those preliminary hearings were heard in January. The court then at that time said that South Africa had made out that there's a plausible case that Israel is committing genocide. We're now going to have to wait probably a year and a half to 2 years for the full hearings to be heard on that particular issue in front of the International Court. The International Criminal Court, also in The Hague, as we know, released an application for arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the former Israeli defense minister, in November. Among other crimes they're being charged with are crimes of allowing starvation, and there may well be more crimes that may be added to that as the course of their investigation winds up deepening. Now, it may be a very small chance that either Netanyahu or Gallant ever have to answer for their crimes in The Hague. They can only be arrested if they appear on the soil of one of the 124 countries that have signed on to the Rome Statute. But that means, in other words, though, even if that doesn't happen, their reputations are irrevocably besmirched by the issuance of the arrest warrant. There are many heads of state and heads of governments who will never meet with Netanyahu because they don't want to be seen shaking hands with a purported war criminal with respect to that. And we also have the possibility of war crimes investigations at the domestic level. Most of these countries that are signed on to the Rome Statute, 124 in total, have domesticated the Rome Statute into their domestic legislation as well, which means that they could try Israeli soldiers, Israeli military commanders, and even Netanyahu or Gallant, should they appear on their soil under the concept of universal jurisdiction. So, sometimes the sun rises slowly when it comes to international accountability, but my sense is that the machinery is moving faster than it's ever moved before with respect to it all catching up with Israel, its leaders, and its policies of war crimes over the last 57 years.
Dr. Mohammed Mughaiseeb, you're in Khan Yunis. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about international criminal courts. We're talking about the international courts of justice. This is far removed from where you are and what you're witnessing every single day. Do you have any faith in those processes?
Still, we have hope. Of course, still faith, to continue. These are legal NGOs who are actors who are really witnessing, and they can speak on this time and raise things to the High Court. But for us, in MSF and myself personally, we have as well. We have witnessed, we have testimonies of, we see everything what's going on the ground, not on the hospitals level, on the ground in Gaza. It's really one of the catastrophic situations me personally faced. I was in the Gulf War before, in Kuwait, Iraq. I saw wars. I hear in the military waves before. But what happened now in 2020 after the 7th of October? It's a huge destruction. This is ethnic cleansing. What's going on? What's going in the north? What's going in the middle of Gaza? The situation is beyond describing it. It's not even catastrophic, beyond describing that it's catastrophic. There is no life anymore. They destroyed everything in Gaza, single infrastructure, structure, hospitals, schools, universities. The physical and the mental health of the people is destroyed as well.
Dr. Mohammed Adeel Khaleel, when you're operating on a child who has been injured by an Israeli drone and you're not using anesthesia and there's a high chance that child isn't going to make it, are you thinking about the International Courts of Justice? Are you thinking about the International Criminal Court? Are you thinking about accountability?
I think when you're in Gaza, it's almost like you're in a bubble. Like you're very focused on the patients that come in. I think that helps with the resolve that some of the physicians and nurses and medical providers that we work with demonstrate. It's actually only outside of the OR that many of these conversations happen. We're just focused on the medical care and trying to create a good environment for everyone that's working during those cases and actually, just discuss more light issues. It's when you sit down after cases or between cases that these conversations happen. And I think that's where it falls on us. A lot of these visiting doctors, visiting nurses, we've all been impacted by what we've seen there. And when you ask the people in Gaza, what can we do when we get back? Everyone has the same answer: just don't forget us, and tell the world what's happening here, because nobody deserves to live like this. I mean, one of the providers at Ali Hospital had mentioned how one of the first things to be hit in Gaza City was the bakery. Like it's one of the vital buildings in the city, providing bread for people, and that those operations have had to move to another building. But it's just very remarkable how you can wall everything off and just focus on the individual patients that come in, and then these more lofty ideas of hopefully eventually ending this are conversations that happen afterward.
Dr. Abu Mughaiseeb, is there any chance that if there is a criminal arrest, if there are charges brought against Israel, that will be enough for you, given what you've witnessed? Is there any chance of is there any justice that you feel will be served by anybody at any point that will be enough?
Again, we hope, but we are pretty sure that it will not be enough. More than 50,000 killed, among them 60% children, 17,000 orphans, 5,000 widows or more. 5,000 amputee, among them children. 40% are children who lost both amputees. More than 100,000 people injured, and destruction of all Gaza. I don't know if it will be enough to forgive or to the court will take the right. I don't know really, but I have no words.
I want to thank all our guests, Dr. Mohammed Abu Mughaiseeb, Michael Lynk, and Dr. Mohammed Adeel Khaleel. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X and Instagram. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.